The war is now inside Russia. Moscow turned into hell. Russia is on fire, literally and figuratively. Oil refineries are burning, chemical plants are in flames, and ammunition depots are exploding. Meanwhile, the Russian media is raging, not just against Ukraine, but also against Donald Trump, who has come out in support of Ukraine. He's made it clear, if Russia doesn't come to the negotiating table, there will be consequences. This anger is spreading across Russian society like wildfire, and sooner or later, the people will realize the truth. The one person responsible for all of this chaos is none other than Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian strikes inside Russia have become so frequent and devastating that reports now suggest Ukraine has the capability to shut down Russia's entire energy sector, the one thing propping up its war economy. With Russian infrastructure crumbling, the tides of the war are shifting rapidly. As always, if you appreciate in-depth analysis, hit that like button to help Luxuria Lounge reach more viewers. Now let's dive into how the Russian people are slowly turning against Putin, starting with Ukraine's relentless strikes on Russian oil refineries. Ukraine's relentless strikes on Russian oil refineries. Putin's economy on fire. Let's start by looking at Ukraine's aggressive strikes deep inside Russia, particularly their attacks on Russian oil refineries. As you can see from the map on your screen, these are the key refineries across Russia. Now here's the shocking part. Ukraine has managed to hit most of them. Just by quick estimation, around 20 out of 30 refineries have been damaged, putting 2/3 of Russia's refining capacity in flames. And that's exactly why we're seeing headlines like this. Ukraine is on track to completely destroy Russia's oil industry, as reported by Kyiv Insider. This is no longer just about military strikes. It's an economic war, and Russia's lifeline, its energy sector, is taking direct hits. Now, why is this happening with such intensity? What changed in January that led to this escalation? Did Ukraine make a New Year's resolution to cripple Russia's war machine? Well, probably. But the bigger reason is that Ukraine's defense sector has reached a new level of self-sufficiency. Before, Ukraine relied heavily on Western allies for missiles, drones, and strategic approvals to strike inside Russia. But that's no longer the case. Now, Ukraine has developed its own powerful defense industry, capable of producing drones and long-range missiles that can strike deep inside Russian territory without needing anyone's permission. To prove just how effective Ukraine has become, let's quickly look at the frequency of these strikes. January 4th, a refinery is hit. January 8th, another strike follows. January 10th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 16th. One after another, high-value Russian targets are being obliterated. We are talking about almost daily attacks, consistently targeting key industrial assets. And unlike Russian strikes that indiscriminately hit schools, hospitals, and civilian homes in Ukraine, Ukraine's strategy is different. It focuses on high-value military and industrial targets that are turning the tide of this war. These repeated strikes also reveal a major weakness in Russia's military defenses. Its air defense systems are either non-existent or completely ineffective. What's the point of having sophisticated anti-drone and missile defense systems if they fail to stop these attacks? Putin's entire war economy, his special military operation economy, heavily depends on its energy sector, and even that he can't protect. The strikes in action, Russian infrastructure in flames. Now let's take a look at some explosive footage from these Ukrainian attacks. First up, Russia's fourth most powerful oil refinery is seen engulfed in flames after a massive Ukrainian drone strike. Jason J. Smart, a political analyst, puts it best: the path to freedom needs a torch to illuminate the way ahead. Well, here's that torch. Watch the clip yourself. Next, a wave of over 10 explosions rocked Rosneft's oil refinery, one of Russia's major energy assets. As many are saying, freedom has come to Russia. Another major hit, a plant in Bryansk, Russia, was struck. Most of this plant's production was directly tied to Russia's military-industrial complex. So the fact that it's been taken out is very good news for Ukraine. Russia's response, a war crime strategy. So Ukraine is systematically dismantling Russia's war economy. What is Russia doing in response? Not much, except resorting to war crimes. Russia has a big problem. It cannot effectively target Ukrainian military or industrial sites because Ukraine's air defenses, supplied by the West and the US, have made those targets nearly untouchable. So what does Russia do instead? It bombs hospitals, residential areas, and civilian infrastructure. These are intentional attacks, acts of terror designed to inflict suffering on Ukrainian civilians and pressure Kiev into surrendering. And this is not speculation. Even Russian state-controlled media openly admits this. On Kremlin-backed TV channels, military analysts are conceding that Ukraine's defenses are simply too strong for Russia to penetrate. Meanwhile, we have footage showing Russian missiles and drones indiscriminately hitting civilian buildings. It's not even a secret anymore. Here's an example of what Russian TV is saying. We shouldn't be fooled by myths, illusions, or historical memories. Despite constant claims that Ukrainian defenses are about to collapse, they haven't. Ukraine's air defenses remain strong, and our advances are painfully slow. In simple terms, Russia can't win on the battlefield, so it's resorting to terror tactics against civilians. Putin's meltdown, no help from Trump, no path to victory. And while all of this is happening, what is Vladimir Putin doing? The man who promised a 3-day war, which has now turned into a 3-year disaster, is freaking out. Why? Because the Trump administration isn't behaving the way Putin had hoped. Earlier, we covered Trump's statements about Russia. But today, let's talk about what other U.S. officials are saying. Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State under Trump, made it crystal clear. This war needs to end. It was started by Russia. It is now a prolonged, bloody conflict, devastating for both Russia and Ukraine. But Ukraine is paying the bigger price. Its infrastructure is being targeted. Its people have been displaced. It's our official policy that we want this war to end, but we cannot reward Russia for starting an unprovoked war. That last part is crucial. The U.S. will not allow Russia to benefit from its aggression. Because if Russia gets a favorable peace deal, it sends a dangerous message to other authoritarian leaders. Launch a war, drag it out, and eventually the world will get tired and give you what you want. This is exactly why the U.S. is ramping up sanctions on Russia. During his confirmation hearing, Scott Bent, the new Secretary of Treasury, openly admitted that sanctions against Russia were not harsh enough under the Biden administration. But that's about to change. If confirmed, I plan to implement far stricter sanctions than what we've seen so far. Russia needs to feel the pain of this war. They need to be forced to the negotiating table. And guess what? He was confirmed. The crumbling Russian economy, Putin's worst nightmare. For a while, Russia managed to keep its economy afloat despite international sanctions. Countries like China, India, and Iran continued trading with Russia, providing some relief. But now that's rapidly changing. Even countries that haven't officially sanctioned Russia are reconsidering their trade ties. Not because they suddenly support Ukraine, but because they don't want to risk getting on the US sanctions list. And this is exactly what Putin fears the most. If Russia's last remaining trade partners back away, his economy will be a relic of the past. Now let's talk about Russia's economic meltdown. Take a look at the chart on your screen. Inflation in Russia is already spiraling out of control, but here's the real catch. These are not even the real numbers. The Russian government is actively hiding the true inflation rate. Independent studies on food and goods prices suggest that inflation could be as high as 23%. That number makes sense when you consider that Russia's official interest rate is now at 21%. Let's be real. When a country's central bank raises interest rates that high, it's because they can't contain inflation. And the worst part? Even with manipulated government data, the numbers still show inflation rising every single month. Just last December, Putin held a 4-hour Q&A session with the Russian public. And guess what? Almost 30% of the questions were about inflation. Putin's response? He blamed the central bank. But in reality, Russia's inflation crisis is Putin's own doing. The war economy, a false sense of growth. So what's causing this economic catastrophe? Military spending. Right now, the Russian military is spending so much money that it's artificially propping up the economy. On paper, the economy looks like it's growing, but in reality, it's a ticking time bomb. Here's why. Russia is building tanks and missiles, but they immediately get destroyed in Ukraine. They are spending billions on weapons production, but there's no long-term economic benefit. It's like burning cash, except instead of cash, it's artillery and human lives. The workforce crisis. Russia is running out of people. Let's break it down. 800,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded. Over 1 million people have fled Russia to avoid the draft or escape the country's deteriorating situation. That's 2 million people gone, vanished from Russia's economy. And the effect is devastating. With fewer workers, businesses are struggling to find employees. The military industry is now competing with regular businesses, offering higher salaries and big bonuses just to attract workers. That means military jobs pay more. Regular businesses have to raise wages to compete. Wages rise across all industries. Inflation gets worse. This is why Russia's inflation is completely out of control, not because the central bank is mismanaging the economy, but because Putin's war is burning through resources faster than Russia can handle. Putin's war is a black hole for Russia's future. Let's not forget, the war was supposed to last 3 days. We are now approaching 3 years, and Russia has barely gained any ground, lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, destroyed its own economy, all while Putin blames everyone else. He's telling the central bank to lower interest rates, but that would only make inflation even worse. He's trying to hide economic data, but independent reports expose the truth. At this point, Russia's war machine is being held together by sheer propaganda. Why 2025 might be the end of this war. With Russia's economy spiraling, sanctions being enforced more aggressively, and even China and India pulling away, it's becoming clearer than ever. Russia cannot sustain this war much longer. This is why it's crucial to share this information, to counter the false narrative that Ukraine is losing. The truth? Russia is bleeding out, economically and militarily. And if things continue at this pace, 2025 might be the year this war finally collapses. We're able to bring these critical updates to you because of your support. If you found this video insightful, hit the like button, subscribe, and help Luxuria Lounge reach more people.